Falcon's Flight, one of the most insane rides to ever be imagined and perhaps the final wonder of the coaster world. During the planning and construction phase of the rise, there were many doubters. Doubters probably greatly outweighed the number of believers for a period of time, but with pockets deep enough, plans bold enough, the park was eventually constructed and opened on December 31st, 2025, as I'm sure many of you guys know. Personally, I was one of the doubters. It didn't have much to go with the ride actually being built, but more of how good of its operations would end up being. However, up to this point, Intamin has done fairly well. Sure, the ride goes down from time to time, but a lot of rides have a lot worse uptime. Now, one of the primary critiques of the ride was that it was going to absolutely burn through wheels, and the park would have to spend a ton of money constantly replacing the wheels. This is a somewhat hidden issue, as if the ride does constantly need new wheels, the guests would probably have no idea about it. So, why not try to use my engineering degree for something and try to scrape together enough information to get a rough thermal fatigue analysis of these wheels to estimate just how frequently these wheels may actually be getting replaced? Of course, most of the information required is not readily accessible for this, but I thought I would have some fun and try to make an estimate of what the cost of the wheels might be. So without any further ado, let's get started. The first step in the whole process is to gather a bunch of averages and material properties before I can begin to set up any of the equations to evaluate the system. Unfortunately for me, thermal fatigue equations are not the easiest portion of engineering and require a lot of variables to compile before I'm able to start making some headway. First, the park typically operates from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., which helps us find out what the average air temperature is during the operational hours of the park. Using global temperature data, the average was calculated to be about 32 degrees Celsius during park operation, which is just below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That is something which will come in handy later. Now, to find the cycle time, the ride takes roughly 4 minutes before it parks back in the air-cooled station, where it will sit for at least 4 minutes before being dispatched. So a single train cycle can be estimated to be about 8 minutes, with 4 minutes of that warming up to the peak temperature and 4 minutes of that cooling back down to the temperature of the air. I have scanned through a lot of different ride uptimes, and I'm going to assume a rather optimistic 80% operational time when the park is open. This just means that about 80% of the time when the park is open, the ride is actually operating. Now, the park is also closed most Monday and Tuesdays up to this point, decreasing the operating days in a year to about 270 days. So, factoring with the expected downtime of the ride is expected to operate for about 216 8-hour days, with each train completing about 13,000 cycles in the year, at 12,960, which feels somewhat low. Now, I also needed to find the maximum operating temperature of the wheels, which was pretty difficult to try to figure out. Standardly, wheels can get up to 200 Fahrenheit, which it's safe to say that these are exceptionally high and probably much beyond that. Some advanced polyurethane compounds have extremely good thermal stability, even above 400 Fahrenheit, which is rather likely that Falcon's Flight is using some compounds similar to that. Given this, I'm going to assume a maximum operating temperature of 350 degrees or 177 Celsius at the end of the 4 minute cycle. Although I could see it being even higher or maybe lower than that, but we're just going to roll with that. I also collected a multitude of thermal properties for the advanced polyurethane compound, which is required to calculate the number of cycles to failure. Those are being displayed on your screen right now. Don't try to remember all of those numbers, they're not too important. During any of the calculations, I'll show the equations being used and explain to the best of my ability what the variables are and what they stand for. I'll try to keep it a little bit nerdy, but not too much so that people don't get bombarded with an abundance of numbers. First, I calculated the thermal strain in the material using the temperature difference found previously and the thermal expansion coefficient of the material. That value is important because we're able to combine it with the Young's modulus of our advanced urethane compound and figure out what our maximum thermal stress amplitude is, which came out to be 26.388, which isn't too important when you don't have anything to compare it to yet. We're able to then take this and input it into the Baskin equation to evaluate the fatigue life for high cycle cases. Now, for this case, we're assuming a high cycle range because the ride is undoubtedly attempting to prep for a long life. Now we are able to begin to input that value into our Baskin equation. Now, this equation uses sigma f prime, which is a property value for the fatigue strength coefficient. The b is the fatigue strength coefficient exponent, and SUT is the ultimate strength of the material. So these are all property values, which the formula can be rearranged so that we're able to solve for NF, which is our cycles to ultimate failure. So here we have our final equation with all of the variables plugged in. Now, any of the sources which I use to get any of these material properties are listed in the description below if you want to go through and read through some of the papers. There were some rather interesting polyurethane studies which I had to read through to aggregate this data. But now we're able to solve the Baskin equation, which resulted in 22,579 cycles to failure. Now, a ride will never ride on its wheels until the point of failure. So we have to add some sort of factor of safety because the park is always going to remove the wheels prematurely. For this, a generic factor of safety of 1.5 is used, although it's very likely that the replacement wheels will come from inspections and not have anything to do with a specific numerical value. However, after adding this final factor of safety, the number of cycles gets reduced down to 15,052 cycles. And here's the equation to show you how that works out. So now that we have a number, we're able to take it back into the number of cycles per day and actually get a good grasp of what this number means. So with 8-minute cycles and 8 hours of operation, each ride vehicle is expected to complete 60 cycles per day, excluding any extra test runs. Now this comes out to just under 250 fully operational days of use out of each wheels. Factoring in the expected downtime percentage and the park's operational calendar, each wheel would be expected to last roughly 14 months of operations. So the expected wheel life of one singular train totals to 1 year and 58.9 days of operation before the wheel should be replaced. Now, there's a couple ways to scrutinize the calculations here, of course. The ride is likely using some more advanced polyurethane blend than what I was able to find material properties for, which could allow the wheels to be replaced less. I also had to do some extrapolation for how many days the park is open and the percentage of time which Falcon's Flight is operating during these park's hours, but of this, the number of cycles to failure is only really affected by the material properties. Estimating the real-time duration for the wheels before they get replaced just gains an understanding of and contextualizes what the number of cycles actually means. Considering the information available, it seems likely that the wheels are capable of withstanding somewhere in the realm of 20,000 thermal cycles. I did attempt to make this a slightly conservative estimation, and I believe that the cycle which the ride is experiencing is probably less severe than the case which I presented here. However, there's a lot of possibilities of how long the wheel could last, and we're likely to never know this information, so it's fun to at least give a educated guess on this because it turns out there's a whole lot of different polyurethane blends and very little information about all of them. To be sure, the number of cycles found here is not completely useless. It gives us an idea of what exactly the baseline might be for the wheel's lifetime. Now, the primary factor here is that the system is significantly more complicated than just fatigue of thermal cycles. The stress which the wheels are undergoing from the ride's forces is likely a much larger contributor to the principal stresses of the wheel. It is for this reason that the wheels are likely to be replaced significantly more frequently than the equation predicts. I hope this doesn't just completely invalidate any of the information to anyone watching. The idea here is that the intense heat of the desert, extreme speeds, and extended ride time are actually relatively unlikely to have a significant impact on the amount of wheels being replaced. The wheels will be replaced sooner, surely, but probably not by a significant margin as might be expected by some people. The largest impact on the rate of the wheels being replaced comes from the friction and stress at the point of contact. Each of the ride vehicles has 10 sets of 6 wheels for a total of 60 wheels, which is likely to be replaced every week to a couple of months at this point in the ride's lifetime. Each of these wheels are expected to cost nearly $1,500, meaning if all 6 trains are getting equal use, that's over 500,000 to replace the wheels. So yeah, Falcon's Flight does have an absurdly high operational cost and is likely burning through wheels pretty quickly, but is probably not just because it's in a desert. That's all for today, though. I just wanted to make a video kind of trying to analyze what the effect of the temperature out in Saudi Arabia may actually be having on the wheels breaking down and needing to be replaced on Falcon's Flight. This ride is absolutely insane, so it's no surprise that the operational price tag which goes along it would also be massive. I hope you enjoyed the slightly nerdier video. Let me know if you enjoyed it, and I will definitely look into making more because I enjoyed looking through this data. It was a little bit of extra work, but I'm a big fan of math and numbers, so this is kind of up my alley. While this week's video may have been going over one of the most insane rides to ever be built, tune in next week to hear about some of the best prototypes which never got to be built. Thank you all for watching, though, and I hope to see you all again soon.